In the early 90s, there's a girl from Detroit with a voice of an angel. At 10 years old, she's on national TV. At 11, she's on stage singing with Gladys Knight. At 12, she signs a major record deal, and at the age of 14, she releases a debut album that would sell over 3 million copies. But 9 years later, at the height of her fame, Aaliyah was gone, dead before she even turned 23.
The plane crash that killed a rising star in the world of music and film.
Because the story of Aaliyah isn't just the tragic story of a promising young singer who was killed in an accident. It's the story of an industry built on greed. An industry that decided a child was more valuable as a product than as a person, from the very moment that she started singing until the day she died. It's a story about how the entertainment industry and the money involved corrupts families, protects predators, and sacrifices people in the name of profit. But more importantly than that, it's also a story of resilience, because even now, almost 25 years later, Aaliyah's fingerprints are still everywhere. Her sound and style are still shaping R&B and pop. The biggest names of today are still paying homage to her. Even her fashion style remains influential. Young people everywhere are still dressing just like Aaliyah did in cities around the world. And her face is still everywhere on social media, on posters, clothes. Even though her life ended, Aaliyah's spirit remains, despite the way that almost everyone around her failed to protect her when she needed it the most. Aaliyah never got to grow old, but her voice, her style, her influence, those things never aged, never faded, never disappeared. And that's why the story of Aaliyah still matters. In 1984, Diane and Michael Houghton moved their family to Detroit. They had roots in Brooklyn, New York, going back generations, but at the time, Brooklyn had been in decline for decades, and they no longer felt there was a future in America's largest ghetto, as it was known back then. Specifically, they wanted to find a safer place to raise their 2 kids, Rashad, age 7, and Aaliyah, age 5. And so they followed Diane's older brother, Barry Hankerson, out to Michigan, where he had found himself involved in a number of business ventures after going to college in the Midwest. And while you might not get why I'm gonna list off all of Aaliyah's uncle's side hustles in the first minute of a video about her, I promise it's all gonna make sense later. Barry's first thing in Detroit after going to college to play football was co-founding a community organization that set up opportunities for troubled youth and helping formerly homeless men transitioning back into normal life. After that, he worked as a producer for local television stations. Then, in 1974, when the city's first black mayor was elected, he became an executive assistant at Detroit City Hall. And during that time, he had also been making connections in the local shipping industry, which he would use to get his brother-in-law a job managing a warehouse so the whole family could leave Brooklyn behind once and for all. So they uproot their lives and go all the way over to Michigan to start over. So they moved to the west side of the city, which was a relatively safe place to be, and they were able to get their kids into a local Catholic school, Jeshu Elementary, which was known for a strong theater program and a focus on the arts. And that's where their daughter Aaliyah would discover that she loved performing, starting in the first grade when she was cast in the 1920s orphan story Annie at school. Her parents would later remember just how happy and enthusiastic she was to deliver the one single line she had in the play. And before long, she was also in their church's choir, where her vocal ability would only grow even further. In fact, Aaliyah loved performing so much and was so dedicated to it that it would be before she even finished the 5th grade that her family recognized they might have an obligation to develop their daughter's talents beyond just school and church. It would be 9-year-old Aaliyah's own idea to ask if she could start auditioning for TV shows. And the first big audition that they were able to find for her was for the role of Judy Winslow on Family Matters, which, as we know, obviously went on to be a legendary show in the late 80s and 90s, but ultimately without Aaliyah being picked for the role. But not long after that, when Aaliyah was 10, she auditioned for and got accepted onto a vocal and dance talent show called Star Search that aired throughout the 80s and 90s with prizes of up to $100,000 available for winning contestants.
I was 10 years old when I went on Star Search, and it was a show that my mother and I watched faithfully, and I always wanted to be on it.
And there would be a number of contestants on Star Search who would later go on to have massive careers in entertainment. Alanis Morissette, Britney Spears, the Backstreet Boys, Justin Timberlake. Those are only a few of the kids that competed on Star Search long before the world knew their names. One crazy example is Destiny's Child before they were even called Destiny's Child. In the early 90s, they competed on Star Search under the name Girls Time, back when Beyonce was just 12 years old. And so when Aaliyah auditions and gets accepted to be on Star Search at just 10 years old, it's a pretty huge opportunity, but it also came with a lot of pressure. Because Star Search was different from most talent shows. You wouldn't just just sing a song and then get judged by the hosts. You would also be pitted against someone else, and the person with the best average score from the judges gets to go on to the next round.
Well, of course, I love to sing, and I love to dance and act, and I love swimming.
And when Aaliyah got to the stage, she displayed a ton of potential with her cover of the timeless jazz classic My Funny Valentine, even in spite of her extremely bizarre late 80s outfit that was apparently sewn by her grandmother. But the Star Search judges were harsh, and ultimately, Aaliyah narrowly lost to her opponent, a 12-year-old girl named Katrina Abrams. And so the story goes that after 10-year-old Aaliyah gets voted off of Star Search, she walked backstage and immediately started crying. But winning or losing Star Search was never the key to a successful career. In fact, pretty much all of the kids who were on Star Search and later found success got voted off early. Justin Timberlake, Beyonce, Britney Spears, they were all dismissed from the stage without being considered particularly promising at the age they were back then. And pretty typical to most talent shows, many of the kids that did win on Star Search didn't necessarily go on to have a career in entertainment at all. The skills that make you win a talent competition at 12 are a lot different from the skills you'd use to become a pop star as an adult. And so with Aaliyah being rejected, even though it was hard for her to deal with in that moment because she didn't understand the ins and outs of entertainment at 10 years old, it didn't mean that she wasn't good enough to keep looking for new opportunities, which is exactly what her family would do. In fact, it wouldn't be long at all before being voted off of Star Search would be nothing but a distant memory. And that's because of Aaliyah's uncle. Because after Aaliyah's disappointment on Star Search, Barry Hankerson also started looking for opportunities to help his niece. But for him, it wasn't just a little kid's dream, because Barry had already been married to a pop star. Back when Barry Hankerson first moved to Detroit and was working as a television producer, he had coordinated a TV special for sickle cell anemia research where one of the hosts was Gladys Knight. And Gladys Knight was a pretty big deal, a Detroit-based soul singer who herself had been a child star since the age of 8 after competing on Amateur Hour, a 1950s talent show that had directly inspired Star Search. Then, in adulthood, Gladys Knight went on to dominate the Billboard charts for decades as part of Gladys Knight and the Pips, one of the biggest family groups in Motown history. Anyway, not long after they met, Barry Hankerson and Gladys Knight got into a relationship and got married in 1974. And Barry, being this guy who was always making moves every chance he got, he immediately leveraged his marriage into a film career. 2 years after their wedding, he's producing a feature-length film called Pipe Dreams about a woman who travels to Alaska to win back her husband while he's working at an Alaskan oil field. And he and Gladys Knight played the lead roles together.
How come you still got my ring on then?
I'm waiting on it to turn green.
And even though the movie was pretty bad and is essentially remembered by nobody on Earth with only 300 views on YouTube today, Pipe Dreams actually earned Gladys Knight a Golden Globe nomination for New Actress of the Year, which with Barry being the executive producer was a pretty big deal on his resume as well. But before they could make a sequel, their short-lived marriage and business partnership ended with a messy and public divorce that included a custody battle over their 2-year-old son that was reported about in newspapers all over the Midwest, with Barry even kidnapping their son at one point to defy court rulings over custody. Anyway, fast forward 10 years and Barry's middle school age niece Aaliyah is in vocal lessons, she's doing school plays, and then even gets onto Star Search, and Barry himself was ready to do whatever it would take to push her forward. And of course, maybe bring himself along for the ride, even if that meant reaching out to his estranged ex-wife and asking her if she would take Aaliyah under her wing. And Gladys Knight, regardless of how she may have felt about her ex-husband, seemed happy to help. With her own illustrious career having started from a singing competition on TV when she was a little kid in the 1950s, she probably saw similarities and wanted to help a young girl with talent reach her full potential. And so at the age of 11, in 1990, Aaliyah went out to Vegas to perform with her Aunt Gladys for a full week of shows at Bally's Casino, singing covers of songs that were popular at the time.
You were working with Gladys Knight when you were what?
When I was 11, I performed with her in Las Vegas at Bally's Hotel.
Aaliyah's biography says that Aaliyah would later credit that string of performances as her greatest training for singing and performing live. The first night, she was so nervous that she stood in one spot on the stage, sang, and then walked right off. But her aunt would pull her aside and tell her, "You need to learn how to move and work the audience." But of course, that didn't mean that getting Aaliyah signed or into the industry at all was going to be easy. Getting voted off of Star Search and then the rejection after the Family Matters audition, that would be far from the only rejection. In fact, at first, when Barry and Aaliyah's family were shopping her demos around to labels, even with her TV and concert experience, they found it practically impossible for a record label to give her a chance. They were able to get her into a room with labels like MCA, Warner Bros., and Jive, and according to Barry Hankerson's later interviews, labels liked her voice a lot. Her potential was very obvious, but they ultimately didn't want to sign Aaliyah, and the reason was simple. She was too young. Getting signed to a label means constant work, recording, the demands of performing, press, being on stage all the time. If a little kid isn't ready for that type of workload, you can't force it. But that didn't mean that Barry was out of ideas for how to get his niece into the entertainment industry. He was going to keep trying to make his niece a star, by absolutely any means necessary. But Barry Hankerson wasn't just a guy who had married a much more successful woman, made a movie with her, and then gotten divorced. After their messy breakup, he only went deeper into entertainment, but not as an actor. That probably wasn't his calling. Instead, he was finding success as a manager and producer in music. He helped manage multiple high-profile groups, he played drums on a couple of notable albums, and he even got into producing stage plays in Chicago. And so right around the same time as his niece Aaliyah was getting into singing, Barry Hankerson was in Chicago running auditions for a stage play called Don't Get God Started at a downtown theater. Suddenly, a young man who wanted to audition showed up too late, and whoever was working the door turned him away. But when he came back the next day and Barry heard him sing, he realized he had found not just a supporting actor, but a star in the making. Barry Hankerson signed him to an exclusive management deal. He took him right down to Jive Records in Chicago, where he knew a couple people, got him an audition, and quickly got him signed, helping negotiate the whole deal himself for a pretty penny. And before long, Barry's new client had become R&B's next big thing. But not only was his first project on Jive a big success full of sultry, sexual songs that topped the charts in multiple countries, he was also establishing himself as a powerful producer and writer for other artists, crafting multiple hits for artists like Janet Jackson, Billy Ocean, and others just in the first year or two of his career. Along the way, Barry also helped him rebrand, changing his stage name from his full government name, Robert Sylvester Kelly, to simply R. Kelly. Basically, Barry Hankerson wasn't a nobody. He was actually the brain behind one of the biggest R&B stars of the early 90s, and he wanted to make the same thing happen for his niece as well, and he wasn't going to take no for an answer. Meanwhile, Aaliyah had been living a mostly normal life for any 13 or 14-year-old kid. When the labels had rejected her for not being ready yet, and she wasn't really invited back to a lot of film auditions, her parents had simply let her go back to enjoying school and acting in plays, things that a 13-year-old should be doing. Even if she was fairly mature and focused for her age, they also let her enjoy the things that were right in front of her in the moment. But everything would change when Barry Hankerson's new client R. Kelly got the big record deal and instantly experienced an explosion in popularity, because suddenly, Barry sees a clear path forward. A light bulb pops up over his head. If he could get R. Kelly and Aaliyah to become a duo, with R. Kelly's talent for production and writing backing up her raw abilities, then the world might finally start paying attention to his niece. So Barry founds his own label, he calls it Blackground Records, and immediately signs Aaliyah to it. And then right after that, he makes a deal with Jive that they could distribute and publish her debut album, with R. Kelly acting as writer and producer for the whole thing. So now, with someone who's quickly gaining traction in the industry involved in the project, they finally had a lead that they could chase after. And so at this point, when Barry goes back and pitches it all over again, instead of being hesitant, the label is downright excited. Finally, Barry had figured it out. By pairing his 14-year-old niece with someone who was already a star, experienced in the industry with a name that people knew, his quest to make his niece a star would finally have some real momentum. Recording for Aaliyah's debut begins in January of 1993, when she was 13, turning 14. But it would take more than 9 months to actually finish the album, because, of course, she could only really work on it during breaks from school. Plus, R. Kelly had to face the challenge of making an entire album by and for a teenage girl. Yeah, this was her album, but he was the one responsible for writing it, naming it, composing, producing it. Songwriting and executive producing, it isn't a simple job. In a way, he was gonna have to get inside Aaliyah's head to make a believable or authentic album for the teenage listeners they wanted Aaliyah to have. I mean, a 27-year-old guy who's known for making sexualized R&B, writing for a high schooler, getting into the right headspace would almost have to be like method acting, making the music immersive, authentic, and that's not easy. So the story goes that during the process of making the album, in order for R. Kelly to kind of get in the right mindset to make the music, he would sometimes take Aaliyah and her friends out for bowling, to play games at the arcades, maybe go see movies, the type of stuff that high school sweethearts might do for fun.
Rob is great to work with because really it's not like we work because we're like really close. So it's like just fun, really. We just hang out, sing.
I don't ever remember working.
Yeah, it's just like fun.
He spent time with me, trying to see how I thought about things and what people my age think. We put in a lot of hours because we'd be in the studio all night to make sure it was perfect. And Age Ain't Nothing But a Number features a variety of different sounds. At the time, it was called New Jack Swing, a specific fusion of R&B, hip-hop, and pop that was pretty popular back then, and it really is musically diverse. There are songs that have a G-funk sound. People would say it feels inspired by Mary J. Blige and Motown. It's full of pop jams, ballads, and the common thread holding it all together was Aaliyah's smooth, ethereal, almost whispered vocals on every song. And ultimately, the hard work they put in had a pretty crazy payoff. When Age Ain't Nothing But a Number was finally released in the spring of 1994, critics would say that Aaliyah, who was now 15 when it dropped, was next in line to become a chart-topping. People immediately started comparing her to older, more experienced singers like Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey. They were praising her angelic vocal skills for having the maturity of someone much older than her. It was widely noted that the album was appealing for both a teenage audience for kids Aaliyah's age, but also enjoyable for older listeners as well. I mean, I'm 25, I'm kind of old compared to whatever high school kids were listening to this in the 90s, but I love this album. It's one of my favorite albums from the 90s overall, and I still think it holds up today. Age Ain't Nothing But a Number peaked at number 18 on the Billboard charts, but within 5 years, it would be certified 3 times platinum. And that kind of shows how deeply Aaliyah's music would resonate, as it stayed on the charts for almost a year straight and continued to sell long after it came out. And on top of that, Aaliyah would also be nominated for Best New R&B Artist of the Year at multiple major award ceremonies. Her sound was soulful without being intimidating. It was pop without being mainstream, R&B without being niche. Her hip-hop flair gave her a big edge. For an album made by a teenager, it was an insane success. And as an added bonus, it happened to be really good. And so almost overnight, Aaliyah and her family's wildest dreams had come true. She was becoming a pop star before she was even old enough to drive. But at the same time, this beautiful, dreamlike album was also going to make her life a nightmare. In the January after the album dropped, Vibe magazine published a cover story on R. Kelly called Super Freak. They focused on his rise to fame, starting with busking on Chicago street corners and subways, to the collaborations with countless pop stars that made him one of the most in-demand names in R&B. They talked about the sexual, lustful contents of his performance and lyrics, but finally, they talked about Aaliyah. But the focus wasn't the sleeper hit album they had made together earlier that year. Vibe was looking to confirm a rumor that had been spreading like wildfire over the last couple of months, that R. Kelly and Aaliyah had secretly gotten married. But when Aaliyah would be pressed by journalists, she would completely deny that she had gotten married to R. Kelly at the age of 14. In December, after being asked point blank about the nature of her and R. Kelly's relationship, she just says, "When people ask me, I tell them don't believe all that mess. We're close, but people took it the wrong way."
Everything's going pretty good. Yeah. Okay, let's clear something up, because you know I've been getting a rundown on the street. Everybody seems to think that y'all are either girlfriend or boyfriend, or cousins, or friends. Let's just get the record straight.
Better go get me a white Jeep.
Well, no, we're not related at all. No, we're not. We're just very close. This is my best friend.
Yeah, cool.
Now, who found her?
In the whole wide world.
But then one magazine would write that Aaliyah had been seen frequently at R. Kelly's house in Chicago over the summer, walking his dog early in the morning or leaving quickly in a baseball hat and sunglasses to hide her identity. But more than speculation, the Vibe cover story actually produces a marriage certificate from August 31st, 1994 in Chicago. It had been filled out with Aaliyah's age falsified as 18 and R. Kelly's age being his real age of 27.
Man, hip-hop star R. Kelly did indeed marry his protege, the 15-year-old singer Aaliyah Houghton. Kelly stated his age as 27, 2 years older than he previously claimed to be, and Aaliyah produced 2 pieces of ID that appeared to show her to be 18.
Suddenly, the whole situation was no longer funny. R. Kelly, almost a 30-year-old man, had illegally married his 14-year-old protege at a hotel in Chicago. Why they did it isn't 100% clear today. R. Kelly's former tour manager, who helped find a fake ID for Aaliyah to get married with, would later say that it was because R. Kelly thought he had gotten Aaliyah pregnant and that in Illinois or Michigan you needed parental consent for an abortion under the age of 18. But if they faked her age and got her married, he could authorize it privately. So it wasn't that they were necessarily in love or that they intended to be husband and wife, But it was that R. Kelly was trying to protect himself from statutory rape charges after he had been hooking up with a 15-year-old. The exact details of R. Kelly and Aaliyah's relationship during that period of making the album and releasing it is pretty murky and disturbing, and a lot of it is based in hearsay, and none of it is pleasant to talk about on the internet, especially in respect to someone who's passed. But the really important part is what happened after the news came out. R. Kelly would only continue to explode in popularity. In the same year, he drops a self-titled album that peaks at #1 on the charts. He has multiple top 5 hits from 95 to 96. The truth about him was out there, available for everybody, but functionally, it did nothing to stop his rising star at all. The biggest song of his career came out just 2 years after this happened. His label, Jive, maintained him as a top artist on their roster, and his countless fans didn't waver. In fact, he only gained more.
Slow dance, girl. Give it up for R. Kelly. Public
Instead, the scandal would be mainly focused on Aaliyah herself.
The Budweiser company dropped her from its Superfest tour because it felt she was too young to be on the road, and most convincingly, the Detroit High School of the Performing Arts acknowledged that Aaliyah is in fact a 10th grade student there. Whether or not she's in legal trouble for passing off fake ID remains to be seen. We will keep you posted.
No one was questioning the uncle that introduced them. No one was questioning R. Kelly himself. Not even her parents faced scrutiny for how exactly Aaliyah ends up getting sexually abused by a man in his late 20s when she's 14 years old. R. Kelly just keeps on trucking, pumping out hits, enjoying the adoration of millions of fans after abusing and grooming a teenager, and on her end, she basically gets blamed. She would be portrayed as the little girl who tempted a man, not a victim of his abuse, but part of the problem. I think in a big way, this was allowed to continue because R. Kelly had become such a huge asset for his label and the music industry in general. There's no one who's actually going to be willing to step up and say anything because of the financial consequences that would create. Aaliyah, however, was a much smaller name. There wasn't really any benefit for the people in power to defend her when she was an unproven artist who wasn't making them as much money as R. Kelly was. I don't think that's why they consciously did it, but it's pretty clear that that's how things went. Reporters wouldn't press R. Kelly about why he would have sex with a 14-year-old when he's 30, but they would ask Aaliyah about it nonstop until her publicist started telling journalists that they couldn't do any interviews at all if they brought up R. Kelly in any way
No, I'm not married. Robert's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. He's a great producer, great artist who I do admire, and there's nothing there.
I think it's something that's really crazy to even think about today. That's not how we see things anymore. A literal girl, a child, kind of tempting a man who falls for her seductive act. That's what the tabloids were writing. That's what was being said on the radio and in magazines. But no, she was in the 9th grade and he was 27 years old. And with all of the negative media coverage, they were having trouble finding people to step up and take control of producing a new project for her. The way that she was being portrayed as part of the problem, a bad girl, someone who causes issues, people were afraid of working with her and attaching their name to hers. Basically, her reputation had been sacrificed so R. Kelly's rising star could continue to grow. And at one point, it was looking like they may not be able to find any producers at all. One person that did offer to help was P. Diddy, known as Puffy back then, although that didn't work out, which was probably for the best in the end. When the dust settled, it was clear that Aaliyah's debut album would never really be seen or heard the same way again. Looking back at it now, it's still a great record, but there's an eeriness to it that's hard to shake. Looking at the album cover where R. Kelly is staring at her in the distance, wearing a vest with no shirt on, it's just weird. You can't help but think of the horror that went on behind the scenes. It's all over the album. Moments that don't feel like they came from the mind of a teenager, but from someone who's attracted to that teenager. Moments that are supposed to sound maybe a little flirty or suggestive, it starts to feel like evidence. Ballads feel like confessions. It conjures stuff that's just nasty to think about. Ironically though, the most popular long-lasting song from Age Ain't Nothing But a Number would be the only one not written by R. Kelly. At Your Best You Are Love, a cover of an Isley Brothers track from 1976, it's the most streamed song from the record to this day, and it had basically no input from R. Kelly himself.
Is there any song on the album that is your baby that you like more than others?
At Your Best.
At Your Best.
At Your Best You Are Loved.
And that's what we're gonna peek at today, right?
That's right.
Why that song?
Because I love the Isley Brothers. And I really admire them. They're very unique. Their sound is very unique. You can tell the Isley Brothers song right off.
It's still a very good album, and Aaliyah is immensely talented, but there's a darkness in parts of it that's hard to ignore once you know the context of how it was made. But even though Aaliyah faced so much nasty criticism from the media and basically got blackballed from the music industry because of it, she and her family still pushed forward and wanted to help her grow and move past that. She needed a new sound and image that would be hers and have nothing to do with the man that had abused her. In the summer of 1995, they started recording demos with producers like Jermaine Dupri, who had already worked extensively with Mariah Carey, among others. But the next album wouldn't start to come together until they discovered Missy Elliott and Timbaland, who at the time weren't the giant names that we know today, having defined an era. Back in 1995, they were in their early 20s and didn't have much experience at all. Basically, they were kind of nobodies. We were kind of nervous because we hadn't done music with any artist of her caliber, but when we first met her, she treated us like we knew her for years, like we grew up with her. She was always very sweet, always smiling, and she made us feel like we were big producers even when we didn't have a hit record out. Even coming off a big album, she never treated us like we were beneath her. It was a big risk. Missy Elliott and Timbaland weren't big names, and from her first album, it had given her a big boost working with a much more established producer. But it's also exactly what Aaliyah needed, a fresh start, collaborators she could grow with. Their creative chemistry was strong, they understood her style and thoughts, it was a much healthier collaboration, and for her second album, Aaliyah would be credited with co-writing some of the songs, and also had a lot to do with the creative direction, much more so than anything she had made before. She knew that she wanted everything to feel sophisticated but street, funky and hot, yet also upscale, and they helped her bring that vision to life.
It was something different they had never heard before, so they said, you know, let's put y'all in the studio with Aaliyah. And we was excited.
I gotta thank her because she heard the specialness in us.
Right.
Because when Sugar and Spice, she's like, there's something special about Tim and Missy. But I don't like the words because it's too young, but it's something special about them. So let's go in the studio and see what we come up with.
But there was another problem. Even more than being young and inexperienced, Missy Elliott and Timbaland weren't even supposed to be working with Aaliyah at all. They were already under a contract to be working on someone else's debut album, and Sony had already paid for the studio time to get that done. They wanted it finished ASAP. But Timbaland and Elliott wanted so badly to work on this project with Aaliyah that they told their other client they would pay him back if he covered for them, and told the label they were hard at work while they flew off to Detroit to work with Aaliyah. It was a pretty shaky moment. Aaliyah's working with these producers who aren't really established in the industry at all, at the same time as they're double-crossing the label they were supposed to be working with just to come be with her. Her family was doubtful that it was even a good idea at all. They wanted her to work with someone much more established, but she also kind of needed it because no one else really wanted to work with her after the media machine dragged her name through the mud. Basically, there's no guarantee that Aaliyah's career really goes anywhere if this doesn't work out, but ultimately it paid off. Aaliyah's second album, 1 in a Million, would be nominated for a number of awards. It would chart even higher than her debut, once again also having a long tail of success, going double platinum in less than a year, staying on the charts for 2 years. Basically, all of the fears they had, the things they were worried about, the controversy, it all faded away because her second album was even better than her first. And it's even more admirable knowing what a tough spot she was in. The whole world was watching for all the wrong reasons, and Aaliyah had to completely reinvent her sound and image to leave that negativity behind and become her own person. And she did it all at the age of 16. But beyond the success it saw in the moment with sales and awards is the legacy of 1 in a Million. Over the years, critics would say that 1 in a Million had a huge impact on influencing much later artists like Drake, Frank Ocean, SZA, Jhené Aiko, while others would also say that it was unlike anything else on the radio at the time, helping reinvent R&B in a moment when it was becoming stale.
I love all kinds of music, and I want to be known as the kind of singer that can do all of that. So that's why I wanted the different varieties on the album to showcase each part of my personality.
1 in a Million showed the world that Aaliyah wasn't just going to survive the abuse and trauma, but she was also going to become something greater than anyone could have imagined. And yeah, what happened with Aaliyah's debut album and what was allowed to happen to her is one of the most disturbing and nasty examples of what the music industry does to young stars. But it's only an even bigger testament to who she was to see such an insane bounce back almost immediately after.
And although she's still only a senior at Detroit's High School of Performing Arts, her new album, 1 in a Million, shows us just how much she's grown as an artist and as a lady. Performing her single, If Your Girl Only Knew. Put your hands together for Aaliyah!
After they pulled off a wild comeback with One in a Million in 1996, it would be 5 more years before Aaliyah's next album, but that doesn't mean she disappeared throughout the late 90s. After reclaiming her sound with the second album, she could step into the future with more control, options, and confidence than ever before, not just as a teenage R&B singer, but a pop culture icon in the making. Because we have to remember that at this point, Aaliyah is only 16 years old, and despite her fame, she and her family wanted to prioritize her living as normal of a life as possible, and even keep going to school in person, even though she needed a bodyguard to walk her through the halls. So even while she's dominating the R&B genre, has her albums on the charts, she graduated high school with a 4.0 GPA and even talked about going to college. But life had other plans. Even while she was trying to live a somewhat normal teenage life, doing homework in between flights and photo shoots, her public profile just kept getting bigger. Back in Detroit, even her senior prom night in 1997 became a huge media event. When she decided to wear pants instead of the typical prom dress most girls would have put on back then, it ended up becoming an iconic moment in celebrity fashion at the time. Even more than just an R&B star, Aaliyah was becoming a trendsetter on a national level. Sleek hair, tinted sunglasses, hats, baggy pants, bandanas, small shirts. You go anywhere in Chicago, New York, LA, whatever. Young people are still dressing like Aaliyah right now.
That's why it takes me a while to put things together, especially if I'm doing a dressy thing rather than a sporty thing. Because what you see here is really me, the baggy jeans and skull caps and everything. So when I'm doing a dressy thing, I've got to still remain in my image. So it takes me a while to put something really good together that still looks like Aaliyah.
In 1997, again while she's still in high school, she signs a brand deal with Tommy Hilfiger. And with her being in all of their advertising material, that would only elevate her profile even further. The red, white, and blue baggy jeans they dressed her in would sell many thousands of pairs, becoming their best-selling piece at the time.
Well, I've always bought Hilfiger ever since he first came out because I always felt that it was me. My image is the baggy pants, little tube tops, and I've always loved Tommy, so it's great for me to model his clothes because I really feel comfortable in it.
And so at 17 years old, she's no longer just a rising young singer. She's now a fully developed pop star, one of the biggest around at the time. And just because she wasn't dropping albums didn't mean she wasn't putting out music. In fact, the spring after she graduated high school, she would release the biggest song of her career by far. Are You That Somebody was a single produced by Timbaland that was released as part of the Dr. Dolittle soundtrack when that movie came out back in 1998. It was an R&B funk song with trip-hop influences that made a huge splash for Aaliyah. Not only was it loved by critics, earning her a Grammy nomination, but it also topped the charts in countries like New Zealand and the Netherlands, although it wasn't able to chart in the US because they didn't physically release it to record stores. But to this day, people talk about it being one of the best R&B songs of the 90s, and it ended up being listed as one of the greatest songs of all time by multiple different publications in the last 25 years. What had started as nothing but a movie tie-in single ended up becoming a certified classic. And soon after that, right around the time Aaliyah would have been around 19 years old, she started working on her third album, but it was interrupted when she got cast as the lead actress in the Warner Bros. Movie Romeo Must Die, an action film that was basically a retelling of Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, but centered around feuding gangs in modern-day Oakland, California. A lot of celebrities try to get into film, and in a lot of cases, people with big names get roles they don't really deserve, and no one really remembers or cares much for it. But Aaliyah was different. I mean, she had been acting since she was a kid, and having started out in musical theater, her passion for acting went hand in hand with her musical talent.
Something I've wanted for a very long time. I've always been into full-on entertaining, which is singing and acting and dancing. But I wanted to wait for the right time. I wanted to wait for the right project, and Romeo was it. It was just the right role. I love Trish. She's tough. She doesn't take anything off of anybody, and that's what I liked about it. That's why I wanted it.
And Romeo Must Die was a solid success. It grossed almost $200 million at the box office, and most critics would say that Aaliyah's performance in the movie was pretty solid. She played her part like a real actress, not just a celebrity who showed up to read a few lines and get a paycheck. But even more important than that, Romeo Must Die led to Aaliyah's most massive single yet, a song called Try Again that was literally record-breaking.
Dust yourself off and try again. You can dust it off and try again, try again.
They may try again for the soundtrack of Romeo Must Die as a tie-in for promo, but it essentially eclipsed the popularity of the movie itself when it became the first song to ever reach #1 on the Billboard charts without a physical release, relying on just radio airplay to earn its sales numbers. Seriously, that was a huge deal back then, and it would only make her value as an actor and a singer go up. If she could make genuine hits out of thin air for the movies she was in while doing a good job in her roles, it would make her a hugely attractive asset for film projects. And again, she was doing all of this, these various phases, eras in her career, acting in real movies, doing a good job, releasing record-breaking singles, all before the age of 21. At this point, Aaliyah had outgrown the tragedy that once defined her career. The shadow of her early years wasn't gone, but she refused to let it cage her, and instead she manifested a new future where she could become her own person, unburdened by the past. And it was in fact, though, her tragedy that would play a big part in shaping her. She would come to be known for poise, confidence, self-assuredness beyond her years, because she needed to be that way to survive. After being not only abused, but abused and then publicly punished for it, Aaliyah never faltered. She just kind of continued to grow in a way that no one could have expected or questioned. She became one of the most notably cool, collected figures in an industry full of the exact opposite. But she would turn into a very private young adult. Her interviews would be polite, but detached.
What are the most important things you look for in a guy?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't have a boyfriend.
Oh, you don't have a boyfriend?
No, I'm single. I'm looking for someone who's got a great sense of humor. I love to laugh. And someone who got a good head on their shoulders, know what they want out of life.
Yeah.
And just an all-around good guy.
Yeah.
You know, not anything too specific.
Missy Elliott often recalled how she expected Aaliyah to act like a diva, having people fix her nails or hair or sipping on tea at the studio, but instead she would say that Aaliyah disarmed everyone with her sweetness. Aaliyah's ability to stay gracious was noted by everybody. Even after everything she had gone through, she didn't let it change her. And so after the crazy success of the Romeo Must Die soundtrack, which had been orchestrated by Virgin Records, Aaliyah and her team pursued a joint venture between Blackground and Virgin to give her third album the biggest boost they could possibly get. And after negotiations, her deal would be valued at a pretty insane $15 million. The announcement came in May of 2000, just a couple weeks after Try Again became a massive hit single. But all of this wasn't the only reason that Aaliyah was having a big year around the turn of the century. Her personal life was also healing and moving on after all the pain she went through in the industry when she was still a little kid. Because in the summer of 2000, while Try Again was basking in the peak of its success, Aaliyah met Dame Dash, and they fell in love in a way that would change both of them forever. Dame Dash was brash, loud, and erratic, a cutthroat entrepreneur who was Jay-Z's manager, the co-founder of his label, his streetwear brand. He was powerful, connected, and had a reputation, to say the least. But then he changed. Aaliyah's longtime recording engineer would say that Dame Dash was a bit of a difficult person. He wasn't kind. But one day, Aaliyah was on the mic in the studio and Dame Dash comes to visit and he asked me how I'm doing, and I was like, what the fuck? But then he smiled and he called her darling, and Aaliyah comes out and I realized he's in love, and it softened him up. Now he's friendly because he finally found love. Aaliyah and Dame Dash would become inseparable. In the beginning, both Dame Dash and Jay-Z had been pursuing her, competing for her affection, but in the end, she made her choice and both of them seemed very happy because of it. But for Aaliyah, this period wasn't just about finding love. It was about finally stepping into her own life on her own terms. After years of silence about her past, years of her personal life being off limits, this era of her career would be a complete rebirth. With a record-breaking hit song, a massive new record deal, a relationship giving her stability, Aaliyah was finally steering her own ship. But despite all the positive developments in Aaliyah's life, she was still juggling two careers at the same time, and the pressure to either deliver on both or focus on one was mounting fast. Movie studios wanted her on set for more films. Fans wanted a new album. Her last one was 5 years ago. If they didn't do something soon, both sides would suffer.
I love music with my heart, and I love acting as well. There's some similarities, but yet there are a lot of differences as well, and I like doing both. And with acting, I get to explore a different side of myself. It can be very cathartic in a lot of ways, and same with music, so I don't want to abandon one for the other. I want to try to do both as long as I can.
And the next movie that she got cast to lead in, a Warner Bros. Vampire movie called Queen of the Damned, would shoot in Australia, only taking her further away from music. But when she went out to Melbourne to film her scenes, at the same time her entire entourage, producers, writers, engineers, would come fly over and stay in Australia with her to finally get the next album finished. It would be an insane grind, recording at night, filming a movie during the day, but it was what they needed to do to keep the Aaliyah machine rolling. But not everything would be perfect, because then came the creative fracture. Timbaland, central to her last era, her sound, her image, he wanted nothing to do with Blackground anymore. Whether it was a disagreement on royalties, contracts, philosophies, I don't know exactly, but the story goes that he just no longer wanted to work with Aaliyah's uncle. At first, it was a big problem, but it also became the test. Could Aaliyah build a masterpiece without the producer that everyone swore she needed? In his place, Static Major would step in as the songwriter. Key Beats, Timbaland proteges, handled the boards. The team stayed in Australia, recording at night while the film shot by day, rebuilding her sound from the ground up. Eventually, they were also able to convince Timbaland to help out with a few songs, all of which would become hits, and then the album was nearly done. It was going to be Aaliyah's most mature work, not about flirting or high school crushes, but about romance, relationships, a real coming-of-age project for a 22-year-old who was both a veteran in the industry, but still had a ton of time to grow. This is where the revelation hits. Despite having different teams for each album, they always get the same result because Aaliyah is the one constant. And people had often commented that maybe the producers were the real geniuses behind Aaliyah's music. But once her self-titled Red album was released, it was hard to ignore that she was the one constant. And her ability to take a song and run with it, making it her own no matter who had written or produced, was what made the music so good. The self-titled Red album would still be futuristic and nostalgic at the same time, the way that a lot of her music had been before. Rock the Boat features spinning synths, bouncy drum. It feels like R&B, electropop, hip-hop, all at the same time. We Need a Resolution features unique Middle Eastern-inspired samples from Timbaland. It makes the song impossible to forget.
Contagious, what's the latest? Speak your heart, don't bite your tongue. Don't get it twisted, don't misuse.
It's different from the last LPs because it's older, more mature, and I think that's very evident on the album. So it really showcases Aaliyah and who she is right now.
And when it was released in July of 2001, it debuted at number 2 on the Billboard charts. Only Alicia Keys' Songs in the Key of A Minor stood above it that week. It was by far Aaliyah's biggest release yet. With Aaliyah now entering her 20s, and with so much experience and accomplishments already behind her, she was cast in the sequels of The Matrix as the character Z, by far her biggest film project yet, and one of the biggest franchises around at the time. But at the same time as she announced that she was cast in a huge Hollywood movie, the biggest movie she had done yet, they were still in the middle of marketing her self-titled Red album. All throughout the summer of 2001, she's on Jay Leno, 106 & Park, promoting her music and doing as much press as she possibly could. On August 21st, 2001, she hosted a giveaway with BET where they gave away $20,000 and a Cadillac to a fan, and then the next day, she flew out to Miami to film the music video for Rock the Boat, which is quickly becoming one of the most popular songs from the new album. For Rock the Boat, they had hired Hype Williams, known for the Empire State of Mind and the Big Papa music videos, to direct. Basically, it was going to be a huge video that would boost her already skyrocketing album even further. When she got to Miami, they filmed a couple scenes with a green screen, and then after that, they were going to fly a small plane out to a nearby island in the Bahamas to finish the video on location at a quiet beach. But Aaliyah didn't want to. It wasn't like her. I mean, she had been working full-time since she was a kid. Saying no to an opportunity or an obligation wasn't her personality, but she was tired, she wanted to go home. For the first time in her career, she was just kind of tapped out. Plus, she wanted to go be with Dame Dash and have a quick break after she had already been outside promoting her new album for far too long already. Her boyfriend would beg her not to go to the Bahamas. She hated flying, especially on small planes, and they just wanted to hang out together, and he knew she was stressed. Dame couldn't accompany her. He had to go get his son from New York for a school event. Her mom was busy undergoing a medical procedure. It was one of the first times that someone in her immediate personal life and family wouldn't be present. But it was too late. They had Hype Williams on the line. They had to finish the video to get it out in time and boost the album even further. She had more work coming up soon. The marketing machine, the label machine, had no time to slow down for Aaliyah. So they load up, get out to the Bahamas, and shoot a video. The video production went pretty much all out. Hype Williams gets them on a big-ass boat to dance on. They've got Aaliyah underwater like a mermaid. It's a pretty cool video, even if the special effects don't really hold up 20 years later. But basically, shooting took a couple of days. They had to load up lights, sound equipment, cameras, all this huge stuff that came with a big production budget, and they had to get it all to the island, switching from being in the water to being on the beach, on the big boat. It was a big, laborious process and a pretty expensive, heavy one too. A teenager who was working at the hotel the crew was staying at during shooting would say that at one point he asked Aaliyah how he could become famous like her someday, only for her to tiredly answer, indicating how burned out she was, "Don't become a singer or a rapper. Write a book instead."
When she actually was saw the plane, she, we had the Blackberries, and she said, "I don't like this plane." And I was like, "Well, don't get on it." She got on the plane, and she always had a very serious fear of planes in general. So she had to overcome a fear to get on that plane on the way there.
And when they finally finished the video, all Aaliyah could focus on was leaving the island as soon as she possibly could. And it's long been discussed and argued about exactly why she wanted to go home so badly. Some people think it's because the hotel had no hot water and she wanted to go home. Some people say it's because she was burned out. Some people say it's because she wanted to see her boyfriend. Maybe it was all of that. We'll never know. There's a term in aviation called get-home-itis, and it describes the way that a pilot's strong desire to get back home can start to override their decision-making skills, attention to detail. It can make them take unnecessary risks during complicated moments, and that's exactly what starts to happen after the shoot wraps. After they finished in the middle of the last day, most of the video crew wanted to stay and enjoy the island until their hotel checkout the next morning. But Aaliyah, her bodyguard, a couple of assistants, and the makeup team all wanted to go back, so they start looking for a plane to charter, but the Cessna 404 they had come on wasn't available. All they could get at that exact moment was a different company that only had a much smaller Cessna 402. And so at the same time as she desperately wants to get home, Aaliyah also doesn't want to board the unsafe looking plane anymore either, and chaos unfolds. The pilot advises that they can't all go on his plane. He tells them that they're going to be overweight, the bags are too big, there's too much film equipment, and Aaliyah gets cold feet. She doesn't want to get on this tiny plane. She eventually walks away and waits in a taxi while her team handles the situation with the pilot and the charter company, who seemingly can't get another plane over that day. At one point, Aaliyah starts complaining of a headache. Someone passes her a pill, which leaves her napping, while they argue with the pilot for hours over the safety of how much lighting and sound equipment they were trying to bring back with them. Eventually, the pilot agrees to take them to Miami after they essentially force him to. Meanwhile, Aaliyah is loaded onto the plane while still napping. The teenage hotel worker would later say, "They just started loading all of this stuff onto the plane. Aaliyah didn't even know she was getting boarded and went on the plane asleep." But after they finally got started, within 1 minute of the plane taking off, reaching a height of no more than 200 feet, it nosedived and crashed into a bush, with gasoline spilling everywhere and a fire disintegrating the entire scene.
The plane crash that killed a rising star in the world of music and film. Reaction today after Aaliyah and 8 others were killed when their plane went down.
The plane, just after taking off for Florida in perfect weather, suddenly plummeted to the ground. Investigators now saying one of the engines apparently failed. Along with 8 passengers, Aaliyah, a young Brooklyn native and a talented singer and actress.
The investigation yielded a long list of disturbing, tragic details. The plane ended up being at least 900 pounds overweight, an insane amount for a plane with an empty weight of less than 4,000 pounds itself. A total of 9 people were killed. The pilot, Aaliyah's 2 stylists, her security guard, a manager from the label, a makeup artist, and 2 employees from Virgin Records. After his autopsy, the pilot was found to have alcohol and cocaine in his system, and looking even closer, they found that he wasn't actually approved to fly the plane at all, and that he had obtained his FAA license fraudulently, having lied about hundreds of hours of training that never happened. And just a couple weeks before the accident, he had been arrested and charged with possession of crack cocaine in Miami. You could write an entire book on the long list of incompetency and betrayals and corner cutting that allowed this crash to happen. But no matter what the root cause was, who was to blame, the end result was a terrible tragedy. A few of the crash victims survived for a short time, but none of them made it to the hospital alive. Not even Aaliyah, who was found ejected from the plane and still strapped into her seat when she died. The reason for the crash was undoubtedly the fact that the plane was overweight. Basically, Aaliyah didn't want to go do the video on the island. Then on the island, the hotel didn't have hot water. Then the video shoot was exhausting and took a long time. And when she was finally done, she just wanted to go home. And that's what it all really comes back to. the people around Aaliyah failing to do right by her, pushing and pushing till they couldn't push any further. Aaliyah's countless fans have been searching for reasons for why she passed for a long time, looking for explanations, conspiracies, maybe someone had a financial motive for killing her, something to make it make sense. But ultimately, you don't even need to dig that deep to see what was wrong. Aaliyah's life had been turned into a product by the people around her. It ceased to belong to her. She wasn't in control. The people with the financial motive were. She didn't want to do the video in the Bahamas, she just wanted to go home. Aaliyah gave her entire life to music and art and entertainment, literally all of it, and the people around her failed profoundly in that regard. Even in the moments before her life was taken away, the people around her are pushing for more. Instead of waiting for a new plane, she's given a downer to make her go to sleep and loaded up onto a plane she said she wasn't comfortable with while she's unconscious. It's the whole story of her life in one moment. Giving everything she has, doing stuff that she doesn't want to do, while everyone around her pushes for more and more and more.
I'm constantly thinking about my life and the things that I want to achieve. Thinking about everything. Not even my life, but just even other people that are close to me. I think about my brother a lot and my family and their lives and what they're going through and how I can make them happy. You know, I'm also someone that likes to make everyone around me happy. So there's a lot going on in Aaliyah's head, for sure.
The plane crash wasn't a freak accident. It was the product of a chain of negligence, a fraudulent pilot, a plane overloaded with equipment that should have been shipped, an exhausted star persuaded to keep going when she already said no, and then being drugged so she'd go without a complaint.
You know, Hype was making this video, and I was like, I know Hype. I just got off of Big Pimpin', where I had to cut the video, you know what I mean? Because he likes to spend bread. So I was like, you know he's gonna make you do another day. Don't do it. Trust me, it's just so he could spend money, you know? I just thought that it wasn't necessary. You know, I knew that was gonna happen. And then, sure enough, she came home that day, and she was like, well, I got to because I got work to do.
But you don't need to blame anyone in particular to see what's obvious. Aaliyah was taken advantage of. Her uncle, who introduced her to his much older client and facilitated a close working relationship that would lead to disturbing sexual and emotional abuse. A media industry that made money from blaming her for it all. Then, as her career became all the more demanding after she never complained about anything for years and years, she finally shows signs of burnout. She cries out for help. She begs for some comfort or just to be in control for a moment. She ends up dying in a gruesome accident that was entirely preventable and only happened because of concern for the bottom line of the equipment on the plane. More than just bad luck, it looks like Aaliyah's life was defined by a pattern of being taken advantage of. That's why it isn't shocking that conspiracies about her life and death have persisted for 20 years. For someone who is so often mistreated, it's hard to imagine that anyone at all cared about her life. Her family, her team, the people who needed to keep her alive to keep making money from her. Her death only became even more of an obsession once people started connecting it to her last interviews, because in the months before her death, Aaliyah's persona started to shift. Obviously, she was already experiencing a ton of career and personal growth, getting into a relationship, being cast in all these huge movies, but even more than that, she seemed to have been changing as a person. During her interviews, she acted more grown up. She would talk to journalists about wanting to have a family with kids, wanting to travel the world and visit Africa and Europe once she had the free time to do so.
Any time for vacations here? You have to make time for those things. You just have to tell people, you know what, I'm taking a week off here and I'm going on vacation. And haven't had the time for that just yet. When I get too tired and I'm down and I'm out, I'll say, look, I need a vacation, but I won't be from it.
But at one point, her interviews became strange. During one, she would talk about repeated dreams where she would find herself flying and swimming in the air, trying to escape the demands of her career. Even though that had defined most of her life, having worked nonstop since she was a child to master performing, living the life of a star, her dreams were telling her that she needed to get away from it. But in the end, she would say that the feeling of anxiety in the dream would go away, and she would go back to peacefully embracing her very demanding lifestyle the best she could. And many people who found her death hard to accept would interpret this as a sign that she subconsciously knew her time on Earth was almost up. In reality, I think it was probably a sign that she was human. The trauma that Aaliyah endured in the spotlight, the never-ending workloads, her own family putting the bottom line before her dignity, Aaliyah had never really said anything. She pushed it down and kept going, and she experienced true success in spite of it all. But eventually, that kind of trauma catches up. No matter who you are, no matter how much money or success you have, it just happened that Aaliyah's life would be stolen before even that moment would arrive. Aaliyah's death sent a shockwave through the entertainment industry. People who had worked with her couldn't even find words to describe it. At her private funeral, hundreds of people who knew her would join to walk behind a horse-drawn glass carriage carrying her silver casket through the streets of the Upper East Side in Manhattan. Thousands of young fans would gather outside the church where they held her service, holding signs with lyrics, t-shirts, playing her music in the street. In his speech, her brother would say, "Aaliyah, you left, but I'll always see you next to me and I can see you smiling through the sunshine. When our life is over, our book is done. I hope God keeps me strong until I see her again." After the eulogies, her family released 22 doves into the sky in her honor. And for a long time, her music industry collaborators would find it almost impossible to process what happened.
She's a beautiful person inside and out, and we're gonna all miss her deeply.
At the MTV Awards, just 2 weeks after she passed, Missy Elliott would break down, barely able to speak.
To the world and to her fans, Aaliyah was known as Aaliyah, but to us, her extended family was known as Baby Girl.
While other artists would wear shirts with her face on it, and yet others would dedicate their performances to her. Timbaland would say that he lost part of himself and his creative energy when Aaliyah passed. Beyoncé would talk about praying for her every day, noting that Aaliyah was the first person to embrace Destiny's Child when they were getting started.
She was our age, and it's just scary because that could have been any one of us, and she was an angel, and I know that now she's with God.
All across America, from Detroit to LA, hundreds of young kids who loved Aaliyah's music would hold candlelight vigils.
I actually took the day off from work today to be here because we all love her and we'll miss her.
And in the weeks after she passed, all of her albums would rise on the charts, even the soundtracks to her films. Her last album skyrocketed in popularity, finally reaching #1 on the Billboard 200 after it had missed it the first time around.
She had it going with her music, her acting career. She had a lot going for a young girl with a lot of potential.
And even now, almost 25 years later, despite her tragically short career, Aaliyah merch and posters are still on the shelves of stores around the country, and her online fan base remains dedicated. There are forums for discussing her career, her work, her life, but at the same time, her popularity also seems to have endured partly in spite of her label, instead of anything they actually did to keep her spirit alive. And even a year after she passed, it didn't stop. The cost for Aaliyah and the other crash victims' bodies to be shipped back to the US remained unpaid by her label, leaving Aaliyah's parents themselves to pay for it. The same happened with her funeral. Executives at Virgin Records had promised to pay for the whole thing, but ended up backing out later. In the 24 years since Aaliyah's passing, her uncle's label, the one he founded specifically to get her career off the ground, would become not a piece of her legacy, but a symbol of music industry corruption and mismanagement. Basically, Barry Hankerson would sign a number of artists to Blackground that would later sue him for essentially ruining their careers. JoJo, a pop artist from New England, was signed to Blackground in 2003 at the age of 13, and she would have a hugely successful career as a teen singer in the mid-2000s. She released multiple top 10 albums, she sold 7 million copies of her records, but she eventually had to sue Blackground for irreparable damages to her career when Barry's label would neither let her drop music or release her from her contract for years. Toni Braxton, 7-time Grammy winner, would also sue Blackground in the mid-2000s. She would allege fraud, deception, and double dealing, and mismanagement of her industry connections. Even Aaliyah's own catalog, her personal musical legacy, would pay the price for Barry's decline. At the start of the 2000s, while streaming was becoming the dominant way for listeners to consume music, Aaliyah's albums became some of the last to not reach streaming platforms. For years, Barry had let his business fall into such disrepair that he didn't have a distribution deal with a company that could get her albums uploaded to the internet. The only music of hers that you could find anywhere throughout the 2010s would be her stained R. Kelly debut, since the rights to that project were owned by Jive and not Blackground. Everything else, hit singles, compilations, her other 2 studio albums, it just wasn't there. It effectively erased her influence from a whole generation of listeners at the exact moment her legacy could have been cemented. But in 2021, once Aaliyah's albums were finally available online, her insanely enduring popularity became very clear. Her 1996 album, 1 in a Million, immediately returned to the Billboard charts, peaking at #10. That's almost 30 years after it came out. In the last couple of years, her hits have racked up hundreds of millions of plays on Spotify. Her catalog of music hasn't lost much relevance, if any, even despite the decade-plus long blackout of her music being unavailable online. Even while people debate if her uncle handled her musical legacy in the same strange, concerning way that he handled her while she was alive, it made one thing very clear. Aaliyah was one of the greatest R&B artists of her generation, at all. The degree to which her music, fashion, performances can all still be recognized as leaving a mark that's alive to this day, it's unlike anyone else. The futuristic R&B lane she made with Missy Elliott and Timbaland, it was a whole new template for artists. Odd time accents, minor key mood, vocal harmonies used like instruments instead of diva belting. Aaliyah influenced Drake, The Weeknd, SZA, Jhené Aiko, basically everybody. And then on top of that, her outfits that fused the tomboy and luxury styles with bandanas, shades, small tops, big pants, that's what literally everyone in the world is still wearing right now. There's no doubt about it, Aaliyah's dress code and musical ideas are much more of a blueprint than most people even know. The sad part is that even after she pushed through the suffering inflicted on her by other people, she still ended up paying the ultimate price for it. It's nothing new, we've heard this story countless times before, but with Aaliyah, it's one of the saddest of all of them. The people around her weren't just business partners and executives, they were her family, the same people who were supposed to protect her life and keep her safe, and the pursuit of money and fame warped their boundaries so badly that even her own uncle started to look more like a pimp. Aaliyah's boyfriend at the end of her life would talk about how Aaliyah, no matter how close they got, even when they were intending to get engaged, would not speak about R. Kelly, only calling him a bad man. That's how much it affected her. Even when she maintained a strong facade on the outside, she couldn't fully share parts of her life with the people she was closest with. A few years after Aaliyah's passing, when Dame Dash's business partner Jay-Z chose to go out on tour with R. Kelly, Dame Dash would name that as the moment that their partnership completely fell apart forever. But it's not even that. People want to protect themselves, their jobs, their stability. It leads to this corporate indifference where the artist isn't a person but a product, and it's the root of these troubles that followed her throughout her whole life and eventually led to her death. It's like the story of Justin Bieber, Britney Spears, Amy Winehouse, all these people who have had their humanity exploited to the point of breaking down or worse. For Aaliyah, she wasn't even ready to cave. She wanted to keep growing and shining, but it would be those same forces that would take her life away regardless. The world of entertainment can be so corrupted by money, self-interest, greed, abuse, that absolutely nothing is off limits. Getting to the level Aaliyah got to is never ever free, and the price attached can often end up costing more than what you get in return. She did everything right. Worked, learned, reinvented herself, carried her burdens with grace, but still, everyone around her treated her like a piggy bank that they could keep pulling money from until they pulled a little too hard and it killed her. But they can never take away the fact that in spite of all of it, we don't remember Aaliyah as just a cautionary tale. She was an artist who pioneered new sounds and new looks. She made an identity all her own and impacted music forever, and she did it all at an insanely young age. Aaliyah is the girl who deserved to live. Tragically, she didn't, but in a way, she still does, because of all the ways that her work will live on within us forever. I'm Philip. This has been Volksgeist. Thank you very much for watching. Because of the nature of this video and the topic and everything, I have nothing to promote, I have nothing to sell you. I will say that if you enjoy the work that went into this video, I have a Patreon page where you can basically donate to the production of more of these videos. I have help with researching and writing, making graphics and images and video editing, all of that stuff. So if you would like to donate some money for me to be able to produce more of these more sustainably, you very much can at patreon.com/Volksgeist. I have absolutely nothing else to sell, nothing to promote, no sponsor, nothing like that, because I want everyone to walk away from this video taking something away from it, realizing something about themselves, realizing what's really important in life, and reflecting on and respecting the memory of people like Aaliyah who sacrifice a lot to express themselves and often pay a crazy price for it. Again, I'm Philip. This has been Volksgeist. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.